catch that?
I'm going to check audio, yeah.
Okay. All right, we're good. All right. You can just say a couple words.
Hello, my name is Wanda Stevens.
Awesome, thank you. If you're ready, we can begin.
Okay.
So, what is your name?
Wanda Brewer-Stevens.
And how old are you, Wanda?
89 plus.
Congratulations. Plus. Congratulations.
Be 90 in November.
Wow. That'll be wonderful. Are you going to have a big celebration for that?
No.
No. So, Wanda, how do you identify? What, your sexuality or just anything that's very important to who you are?
Well, it's hard to define. I've finally gone pretty much to bisexual because I married when I was 21 and we raised 4 kids, and my husband lived to age 88. He died in 2017. And in the meantime, I've had close women friends, never had a sexual relationship except with one. So it's a bit hard to define. I've been pretty much consider myself an educator. I got my bachelor's in home economics and taught high school home ec for 3 years with my second year off with having my first child. And then when I was pregnant with my second child, I resigned and stayed home and raised kids because the child care costs would have been about equal to what I netted from my job. But I was never a stay-at-home person. I worked in AAUW, the American Association of University Women. Was an officer, attended meetings regularly. Didn't attend an out-of-town meeting until my kids were grown enough to stay by themselves. Because my husband was an engineer and he was out of town sometimes a couple of nights a week. So if I went anywhere at night, I had to find a babysitter. And so I was active in that. I was active in the Methodist Church. Helped start a daycare center there. Helped keep the Sunday school classes staffed. And worked pretty much full-time during school hours. Tried to be home by 3:15 when my kids would get home. They were in elementary school. We were close enough to walk, and in junior high and senior high, they rode a bus back to that elementary school, and quite often they had activities, so I would pick them up at the school and take them where they needed to go. So I was pretty much a mother from 3:30 on. I was always interested in politics. From the time we moved to Arkansas when I was 15, it was when Sid McMath was running for governor, and about 8 other people at the same time. So I picked him up, and of course was not old enough to vote, but I talked to people about that. I was interested in what they thought, and told them that I thought he'd make the best governor of the ones that were running. I guess that's good enough for an introduction.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Just a couple clarifiers. What year was it that you graduated college?
I finished classwork in 53, and my degree, I got the degree the next January, which would have been 54. And then I got a master's then. It was dated in 58. For my first graduation, I was in New Zealand. I was an international 4-H youth exchangee and went to New Zealand and lived with farm families for about 6 months. And there were 8 of us. 4 went to New Zealand and 4 went to Australia, and 2 went to the Philippines, but we just did training together with them, and then we didn't see them anymore until the experience was over pretty much. So that was mailed. So.
Did you go to college in Arkansas?
Yes. I got a 4-H scholarship for being a national garden winner for $200, and that was a good amount in 1950. Graduated high school in 50. And went there for a year, and then in the summer I went back to my home in Malvern, and my mother was a teacher, and she was going to college at Henderson to finish up her degree. So I went with her and got, I guess, 6 more hours. So I had too much to transfer to the university then as a freshman, or to stay at Tech for another year. I couldn't have transferred all those hours. So I came to the University of Arkansas as a sophomore in 1951.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to move on. What was you told me a little bit, like you were part of AAUW and some different, you were in New Zealand a little bit. What was your other experiences with activist organizations during your lifetime?
Well, after I was working with AAUW, I was president for, it was 1975 to 77, and I was going to do a lesser job with them. And one of the women who was a member of both, she was one of the early medical doctors, Wilma Sachs, and she called me to be president of the League of Women Voters.
Cool.
And I said, "You must be kidding. I've never been to a league meeting." Although I was a member, you know, I had joined to support them. And she says, "Well, you have the administrative experience and you have the talent. You could do this." And I thought about it for a while. And yes, I could do that. And so I agreed and was president of the league then, the county league, for 4 years.
Thank you.
2 terms.
So you're a very educated woman. My grandmother has 2 master's degrees, and she's a very similar age as you. And she expressed that being a very educated woman at the time was difficult. Did you find that similar experience?
No, because I was married and had kids and, you know, fit in fairly well with the culture, so of course, home ec teachers work 10 months a year instead of 9, so my salary was about the same as the men. So there were not many political candidates, very few, not any on the state level that I remember. Some of my league friends were on the city council or the county quorum court. And it wasn't until, I guess, '82 that I went down to the library to hear a program that Now was doing, and liked what they were doing and the officers, so I joined, and then the president resigned, the vice president moved to Mexico, the secretary took a job in the next town, and they were looking for a president, and I was about the only one active that was left, and so I did agree to do that and went to the national convention. We got a ride with a woman whose mother was in the nursing home up there, and she liked to go 2 or 3 times a year and visit her, and so she said, "I'm driving anyway, I won't charge you anything, I'd be glad to have the company," and so 2 of us from Fayetteville went to the national convention and got interested in Now politics. We helped elect a Little Rock woman, Kathy Webb, who you may run into in your work. And so I was active in Now and participated in it, and we built up a lot more members in the chapter for a while, and there were lots of Now groups around Arkansas at that time. So those were my 3 activist organizations. Well, church too, I was still active in it and got an award for the lay person of the year for '78, I think.
Thank you.
But,
so when did you become involved in Spinster Haven, or now Elder Tree?
I was not much involved in Spinster Haven. I was a member and joined, as I joined a lot of women's organizations, just to, numbers help you politically, and any amount of dues helps to, it should pay its expenses anyway for you, for them mail newsletters or whatever. But I was not much involved in it. They said the purpose was to help the older people, and they got a place out in the country, which was nice to go swimming. They had a swimming hole along the, I guess, the West Fork of White River. But anyway, I was not involved, and I thought the project couldn't go because they were wanting people to build their own houses, and most of the lesbians that I knew didn't have that kind of money. There were others, professors at the university and so on, that I didn't know at first were lesbian. But I was very little involved in Now until we came here, and Anna Linvall got my name somewhere and just kept inviting me to things, and finally she says, "Why won't you come?" I said, "I don't know, I've got a lot of other things to do." She said, "Well, just come one time and see what we look like," and I did. So the first Friday potlucks I started coming to, but she's responsible.
So When did you start going to those potlucks? Do you remember the year?
Probably the year my husband died, 2017.
So, what does Elder Tree mean to you? What does it provide for you?
A place to see some longtime friends and some new friends. And for a while we played games after the meal, so it was a place for recreation for a while.
Was it a sense of community? A sense of community?
A sense of community. Well, yeah, a lot of these are people that I've known for ages. Nancy Vaughn and Diana Rivers, and mostly people from the land out there at Crosses, but
So, some of the other women have mentioned Ola and that land community. Were you involved in that at all?
not really, except that I've visited out there with other friends.
So, what was your motivation behind deciding to come to Elder Tree?
Mostly just to get this woman to shut up, you know.
Persistence, right? Are you glad you came?
Yes, it's nice, and I mean, Anna went out, resigned after the first year, so the other directors have been interesting folks, and I enjoy the potlucks. I came to movie night sometimes and enjoying those. Game nights, I came for a while. So mostly just as a social, recreational time.
Thank you. So what does separatism mean to you, and would you consider yourself a separatist?
No, I guess not. I've always been pretty much in the mainstream. The things I do outside the mainstream or as regular are probably not the major things. So I've tried to influence or educate mainstream women, at least to some extent, but evidently have failed because the way the culture's going right now, the Republicans have gotten more radical right, and so I'm in the minority with Democratic activists. When Ronald Reagan was elected, I thought, well, we swung to the right, we'll swing back toward the left in 20 or 30 years. But now it's been, 40, 42, and we're just going farther right. So, and I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it can be scary.
Yeah.
And I know some of us feel that fear too, but I just want to let you know that we're out here and we're trying to take up the torch and continue what Women Like You did.
Good.
I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional.
That's fun. Good.
Okay. So you mentioned, like, you tried to influence more mainstream women. Did you feel like you were kind of had a foot in both worlds, kind of?
Yeah. Always. And people ask you to identify yourself or identify your sexuality, and most of the time I just left them blank. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm
You're just you.
just me, trying to do what I can.
Well, we appreciate it. So how, what was kind of the political climate of Arkansas and Fayetteville in the 1980s and 90s?
Fayetteville has always been probably the most liberal city in the state. Parts of Little Rock are, but the whole area is not. So we've had some great candidates run for Congress there, and they just can't quite win. Joyce Elliott lately, and I don't know if Clark Tucker ever ran, but he's a good guy most of the time. He made excuses for the redistricting, cutting up Little Rock into 3 different congressional districts. But
What about the social climate towards women and people in the lesbian, gay, bisexual community?
I don't know why people want to be so hateful. I mean, even if they watch television and see these parades, there are people of all kinds, and this Fayetteville Pride Parade here had a huge following, and not all gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess our representatives are old school. They're mostly older men. Our national rep is an older white guy, and all the rest of them are white guys who are 60s or above, I think. I don't know how old Westmoreland is in southeast, but southwest rather. Somehow we're divided. I guess birds of a feather flock together, but we don't integrate. They don't know or don't know they know gay people. I really don't understand.
Thank you for that. So, how has Spinster Haven or Elder Tree evolved over time?
Well, I've kind of been on the periphery, so the people who started it were middle-aged folks and active folks and skilled in building and all that, you know. So their view at that time was that when they were older, they'd be the same way, pretty much, I think. And so now they've all gotten into their probably 70s, and Diana Rivers is 1 year older than I am. She's already 90. They realize that people just can't. I mean, most elderly people in their 90s can't navigate on the ground without some smooth walks and so on, and so people weren't coming out there to that Spencer Haven property, so they sold it and had money and thought they'd buy a house in town where people could come easier and they could stay here and so on. And you know, they asked for donations at every event, so with no events pretty much during the last couple of years, they I'm sure must have been dipping into their proceeds that they got from that sale of property. But as far as I know, that's pretty much what happened. But again, I was not making the decisions. I was not in the leadership position with Spencer Haven.
Well, thank you so much. Just one last question before we turn it over to Dr. C. What is your most influential moment in your activism or in your life?
The time I was happiest with was when we won the election about abortion restriction in 1986 by about 500 points statewide. You know, there are 2 million people in Arkansas, maybe 1 million of them voted, and we won by 517, I think was the first count. So that was the happiest moment, I think, in my activism. I'd been employed by now, full-time, temporary job from July through the election, and tried to organize statewide. And so I really think, although I never did get the tape to prove, we now contracted for an ad in a station that had south of Little Rock. And when the maps showed, they were the area that was most against this thing. And what we had was just a couple of old guys. I don't remember Earl and whatever, you know, like if you're all from this area, if you see TV from this area, sometimes there's a furniture company, Hank's Fine Furniture. And we had a couple of old guys talking like this, and the punchline was, they must think we're stupid. And so that was an effective ad. They were trying to restrict abortion and that, and then they were still using it themselves. And anyway, but we had a celebration over in Osceola, somewhere outside of Osceola. It wasn't in the city. It was where our state treasurer lived at that time, Marcia something, whose name I've forgotten. Anyway, that was probably best. We did win Kathy Webb as national secretary of NOW. In '82, at the first NOW convention, I attended national convention. So we had some good wins.